Kia ora, I'm Tim McCready and this is Too Much Talk, a podcast from Onehunga FM. Way back in 1893, Elizabeth Yates became Mayor of Onehunga and the first female mayor in the British Empire. She famously said,
"There is in both borough councils and in Parliament too a great deal too much talk."
In Season 2 of Too Much Talk, we'll be speaking to those candidates vying to be the MP for Maunga Keke, as well as some local friends and commentators. This election is set to be one of the closest ever, and who you choose to represent us locally can have a big impact on what happens to our part of Aotearoa, New Zealand. So listen in and make your vote count. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Dr. Sapna Samant, a GP, a filmmaker, a writer, an activist, and a self-proclaimed stirrer. Sapna is the Green Party's Maunga Keke candidate and chats about her journey to New Zealand, her aspirations for the country, and her love of shopping. Sapna, kia ora, welcome along to the podcast and thank you so much for being here.
Kia ora, namaste, thank you for having me.
It's really great to talk to you, and I thought it would be nice, given you're relatively new onto the political scene. I'm not sure that all of our listeners will necessarily know you, or they may know you from other areas, but I wonder if you could give us a little bit of an overview of yourself.
Sure. So I am originally from India, was born in Mumbai, and I arrived in Aotearoa 1st of December 2001. So I've been here, I think, 22 years this year.
Wow. Yeah.
In December. Yeah. I used to practice as a GP back in India, but when I came here, I decided I didn't want to go through all the requalification stuff. So, and I love movies. I love to write. There were a few things in my life I had not explored. So, starting on a clean slate, I went to Auckland University, did a master's in film, television, and media studies. Did one of the last papers in short screenwriting that they were offering. And then I worked for freelance for Radio New Zealand for a really long time. 2002, I did some stuff, went on until 2009, pretty much. And meanwhile, I did a whole bunch of other things, volunteering for ethnic communities, refugees, the stuff that I really like to do. And I was encouraged to go back to medicine because I was told that I had very high intercultural communication skills. And honestly, I didn't know what that was. I'm multilingual. I'm multilingual, and I can, a few, smatterings of a few other languages. So I decided to give it a shot. It's been in the news lately about immigrant doctors and how tough the pathway is. So I didn't have any money at that time because it's expensive. Artists are poor, as we know. So I borrowed some from my sister, and my mom gave me some. Friends bought me books to study. I cleared all the exams in the first shot.
Amazing.
It was a fighting with the medical council and getting myself on the pathway to actually work. And so here I am. So yes, I've done multiple things. It's been great.
That's amazing. And as I was, reading your bio and things ahead of this, I was really fascinated with how many sort of things you do juggle. You're, as you said, you're a GP, you're a filmmaker, you're a writer, you're a mum, and you're an aspiring member of Parliament. Can you share what your secrets are for finding time for all of this? Oh, okay.
Time management. Very good time management. I'm very strict with myself. And I think when I came here and I started working in the creative arts sector, it's very easy to slide. It's very easy if you don't have to go to a 9-to-5 job. If you don't have to be at a specific place at a specific time and you're working from home, it's very easy to slide into just not doing things. And so I've always been very strict with myself and scheduling my day. And then as a doctor, of course, you have to. And that helps me. And, I'm permanently fostering a child. When he came into my life, my mum also moved in with me because my dad died in 2016 and she was by herself, but she had a New Zealand permanent residence from a long time ago. So she moved in with me. So, having your 80-year-old mum with you is a blessing.
Yeah, changes up your lifestyle a little.
Yes. You still have to be. I'm still very, very strict with myself.
Yeah. And one thing that you haven't touched on, but I was interested in your bio, and I think it's on the Greens website, but it's also on your LinkedIn, that you describe yourself as a GP, a filmmaker, a writer, and a stirrer. And I had to ask, what does that little bit there mean?
I don't know. I suppose you can use common words like shit on radio now because I've heard it on RNZ.
Oh, anything goes on this podcast.
All right. I just have to be careful still. Yes, so I'm an activist in the Indian community. So a lot of my work is around the Hindu-fascist ideology, against the Hindu-fascist ideology, which is, a project that started in India in 1925. But it's sort of, taken hold over a long period of time. And then when Narendra Modi, well, even before that, when I moved to New Zealand and I discovered that the Hindu Council of New Zealand, which is the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, a religious militant organization, is situated, has a branch over here in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, I was shocked and dismayed. And, I sort of stood up to them. At that time, I was by myself and I had to highlight these things. And, I got dismissed and I got, threatened and a whole bunch of other things. But it's just really important because I had firsthand experience what had been going down in India just before I moved. There was the demolition of the Babri Masjid on 6th of December, 1992, which was a very, a black day in the history of India. And there were 13 bomb blasts in India on, I forget, in March 1993, 12th of March, I think, which is, one of the biggest terrorist attacks before 9/11. So I had experienced all of this firsthand. I had a cousin who was, who escaped death just by being in another part of the same room and glass shards going into his, arm. And my sister was stuck in in the place where she worked, and they had a bomb blast in the same place, but she was just on a different floor in a different part. So these are, first-hand experiences, lived experiences. So when I discovered they were here, I was very dismayed and very angry and saddened at the same time, because we shouldn't be bringing our, extremist ideology to New Zealand, to Aotearoa. And first of all, we're living on a stolen land, on stolen land over here. So how do we bring our colonial thinking and impose it over here? So that's the activism I primarily do in Aotearoa, is to highlight this. And now I have, a bunch of activists who also have, we are a collective. So we do all of this stuff, highlight this issue. And that is the reason why I was encouraged to put my hat in the ring.
That's exactly it. I was going to ask you. It sounds like there's probably some threads there that are consistent.
Yes.
But could you tell us a little bit about what it was that motivated you to enter politics, specifically for the Green Party?
So when I moved to New Zealand and I was eligible to vote straight away, because fortunately for me, I came here with a permanent residence at that time. And which is again quite rare, because there's lots of migrant stories people who come in with difficult visas and have to struggle for a long time. So I was quite lucky that way. So I was eligible to vote. And I remember voting. Helen Clark was the prime minister that time, and I remember voting Labour because everybody around me was doing that, but didn't really have the capacity to ask questions at that time because I was still learning. And over the next, by the next election cycle, I sort of realized that actually that's not for me. And here are these new people called the Green Party of Aotearoa. I think Rod Donald and Jeanette Fitzsimon were leading at that time.
Days. Yes.
So I just found the way they spoke and what they were saying just really interesting, and it touched me in different ways. These are things that I had thought of but never articulated, because coming from India, these are not, at that time, were not commonly talked about things. They were not talked about in my social circle over here, my limited social circle that time. And so I started, voting green. Since then, that's maybe a really long time ago. Yeah, and I eventually, but you have your migrant struggles and working, requalifying, and then so you don't really think of becoming a party member, or these are not things that are come naturally to us. So if you're coming from, India is a democracy. Well, it's eroding now, the idea of democracy. But when I came, and, we're really proud to be coming from a huge democracy. But all these things like, becoming a member of a political party, or actually participating in party activities without having to be a candidate, and just understanding these things going on, just really new to us. But over a period of time, I realized I could become a Green Party member, and I could, participate in decisions or understand the internal democracy of a party. And that's what I did. In 2017, I became a party member. But then I got my son. So, when he came into my life, I decided I couldn't renew my membership anymore, because I just didn't have the capacity.
A few too many things to juggle. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. But then last year, when my Indian activists encouraged me to put my hat in the ring, I knew that you would have to become a party member again. And that's what I did. And then I put my hat in the ring, and so here I am.
Amazing. Oh, thanks for sharing that journey. That's fascinating. And another thing I wanted to, you can tell I did a bit of research before this conversation, but while I was researching for this, I came across a really interesting New Zealand Herald article from 2010. I'm not sure if you'll remember which one I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
But I guess you came to New Zealand in, was it 2001 you said?
Yes, December 2001.
So this is sort of, you'd been, just to set the scene, you'd been in New Zealand for about 9 years, and you were interviewed as part of a series that the Herald was doing on views of Auckland as it prepared to merge into the super city that it has become today.
Yes.
And I thought a really interesting quote that you said in that article was, you said, "Every time I return to Auckland from a trip overseas, I feel irritated. The public transport sucks. There aren't enough cultural activities. The shopping is even worse." And I wondered, 13 years on, have your thoughts changed at all on that?
I tell you what, I lived in Wellington for 6 years. My thoughts have changed.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Well, you might be spending a lot more time in Wellington. Who knows?
Well, it was, I think for me, when I went to Wellington, it was, I had lived in Auckland for 11 years by that time. And, I had a huge social circle then. And I think for me at that time, when I wanted to, I love public transport, and, you're forced to buy a car and you have to do all of these things as a migrant. I didn't even know how to drive when I came to New Zealand, because in Mumbai, you didn't need to. You could just take a bus or call a taxi, right? You didn't have to do all of these things. So there were a lot of new things that I learned, and it's not easy, as you know, to own a car. It's expensive. I'd rather just hop into the bus and go somewhere and not have to worry about parking and petrol and things like that. And shopping,
Yeah.
yes, the
And I
Indian
think,
shops,
I mean, I guess
yeah.
it's interesting to put it into context back when back in 2010, because I think things, public transport, while we're certainly not anywhere near where a lot of people would want us to be, I think things have improved vastly since
Yes.
2010.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And 2013, I moved to Wellington because I got a job there as a GP. And I
Right.
loved my job. I could go there at the drop of a hat just to work at that same place. But Wellington itself as a place was really difficult for me. I lived in Karori for a bit, and I couldn't fathom, first of all, in Wellington, I couldn't fathom the hills and the narrow streets and all of that. And the wind, I have wind trauma.
Well, I don't know. Auckland's probably just as bad at the moment.
Yes. But, I should not dismiss Wellington at all, because I did have, I made friends, and it for a little city, it can be quite nice.
Yeah.
But I think it was just at that time when I was, trying to, do full-time medical work, and also not finding time for my social activities or to hang out and all of these things. I think that sort of stays with you. And then definitely there was the shopping, because what I would find here, it's better now. They had the first H&M there. And I lived in Petone. So, I'm talking like a, consumer capitalist, but
no, this isn't Green Parties at all. Green Party at all. So let's fast forward 13 years. You're now running to be in the Green Party and the local MP for Maungakeke. And I was interested to know, what is your connection to the area?
Yeah. Okay. So I lived when I moved to Auckland. I lived in Epsom for a little while because I worked at Royal Oak, and it was easy, and of course Onehunga is the next suburb, so we used to come down there a lot. Of course, dress smart, but just the Indian shops there, the little street there, and that's one reason. And I love One Tree Hill. Sorry, Maungakeke, not One Tree Hill. All the the little Ellerslie, the village is fascinating, and the train station is right there. So the urban things that I really like, they're all there in Maungakeke. That's number one. And number two, because Chloe had stood there as a candidate in her first outing, and then there was Ricardo. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll just follow their footsteps,
Both quite prominent MPs now.
Yes.
And so when you think of Maungakeke, what do you think are the defining issues for this election? What are the sort of things that you're hearing about on the street that people are concerned about?
Okay, so one of the first things that when, we are now phone calling, which is one of our primary things. And while we're phone calling, there's two things that we come across is cost of living. And then at some point we come across increase in crime. So I have, answers for that. But my other observation, having visited Maungakeke and driven through so many times, is the increasing gentrification that is happening. The newer construction that's coming up, it's good. It's that we have, intensive housing, as it's called. It's important because we're giving people, options. But that's changing the nature of that suburb, isn't it? It's a suburb with a history. It's an old suburb. The electorate itself was made up of 3-4 different suburbs, all of that. So I think as somebody who's standing as a candidate for that electorate, I have to be mindful of how there will all these disparities, which are the primary thing. There's housing that a lot of people do not enjoy, older people, but as in people who've lived there for a long time. I'm trying not to be ageist here. That's one thing that comes to mind. But the two other things that people tell us when we're talking to them, or when we were door knocking as well, was cost of living and increase in crime. Are the two most, which is generic. It's not really specific to the suburb.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get down to talking about public transport.
Interesting.
Although there's good bus connections and a train station. Two train stations. Yeah.
It's a reasonably well connected part of Auckland.
Yes. Yes.
On this podcast, we're talking mostly about local issues, but given you are standing, for the Green Party, could you point to maybe one or two of the Green policies that you think will help to address sort of the needs and issues that you've already outlined?
Okay, so cost of living, of course, we have our, fair tax policy that we have, that the Greens released a couple of months ago, which is to tax the wealthy, the 311 families, and 95% of New Zealanders will get at least $385 a week in their pockets. They can choose to spend it any which way they want, which is really important because that's going to help with cost of living. You have extra food on the table. You can actually feed your kids. You can pay your power bills. You can do so many other things. You can go on a holiday, potentially. A lot of us finding it harder and harder to go, even go on a short break now. So that is the cost of living. And secondly, the, increase in crime. So, and I actually released a video on TikTok just yesterday talking about this. I haven't seen
that one. Yeah.
Just yesterday. I think it's really important to address this issue, not only because it came up as a concern for Asian voters when RNZ did a story about Asian voters and, what they're concerned about for this election, but this general myth that if you're tough on crime, then reoffending, people don't reoffend. And there's enough evidence around that actually doesn't work. And the Green Party policy is actually to keep rangatahi, our young people, out of the justice system. That'll happen by having whānau and community-led programs that offer intensive wraparound support for our people. And of course, we have to address inequity, housing, family violence, intergenerational trauma, hoki whenua mai, land back is really important for people to, I think once we empower people, they start making those decisions that benefit their communities. And this is what I talk to people as well when I've been door knocking or when I'm on the phone talking to people, that these are how we address these issues.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, great. Thanks for outlining that. Now, for this next part of the podcast, I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. So just some short answers, just to give people a chance to get to know you a little bit better. The first one is who is a political figure from a party outside of the Greens that you look up to?
You mean locally?
Yeah, in New Zealand.
Okay, I would say that Jacinda Ardern did a lot of good work during the pandemic, and and she brought a lot of sincerity to her work, which I admire a lot. I mean, we could argue about ideology and all of these things, but the genuineness that she brought to her work, really wanting to do things, is very admirable.
Yeah, okay. And stepping sort of outside of politics for a little bit, if you had to recommend a TV series to a friend or a movie, I'm going to allow you to suggest a movie either, which one would you suggest?
Oh gosh, get on to Ahsoka, the Star Wars stuff. Now, what I watched a movie called Made in Heaven. Not a movie, sorry, a TV series. Let me talk about a TV series. I watched an Indian TV series called Made in Heaven, which is on Amazon Prime. That is set in New Delhi, and it's about two people who run a wedding. What is it called? A wedding. They're wedding planners.
Right.
And the first season is really amazing. The second season is also very important. I mean, it's caused a lot of controversy in India because of, of intellectual property and, taking things from a caste oppressed writer and, using her story. But I still think that it's worth watching because the characters are complex and they don't redeem themselves in the end, not for the audience.
Right.
They redeem themselves in their eyes, but not for the audience, the protagonists. And I think that's really great storytelling. Is that we are all complex and we should not be, good, bad, evil. All of these things are a spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'll look out for it. It's always good to get a suggestion that you haven't heard of before. Okay, so for this next question, I want you to imagine you're inside a supermarket in the chocolate confectionery aisle. You feel like something a little bit sweet, just as a bit of a treat. What thing are you going for? What are you going to grab and put into your trolley?
Oh my gosh, Whittaker's artisan chocolates, of course.
Oh, the artisan, the little bars. Yeah.
No, they have the big bars.
Well, yeah, but sort of not as big as the big blocks, right? They're
but that's right, but nothing like Whittaker's. If not that, I would go for the milk chocolate, but Whittaker's.
Yeah, milk chocolate's hard to go past. Okay, and what's the most sort of unexpected or interesting skill or hobby that you have outside of politics? We might have already touched on these, I'm not sure, but...
Oh gosh, no, those I do for a living. I think I like to cook. I mean, my mom doesn't let me into the kitchen that often, and so I have a designated day on which I cook. And of course, she critiques my cooking because she's an Indian mom. But I like to cook.
What would you cook? What would be your go-to?
What would be my go-to? I would make dal. What we call in Marathi, we call dari chamti. It's very specific. Rice and potato bhaji.
Sounds delicious. Yeah. Okay, and for someone listening, let's just imagine someone's listening to this. They're in the early stages of their career and they want to follow in your footsteps. What's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Oh, stick to the truth. There will be really, really tough moments, but there's nothing like integrity and truth. And if your values don't match, just walk out.
Great advice. Second to last question. What is your favorite thing about Onehunga and why do you love it?
Well, I tell you what, I love the Pacifica shops there. So I shouldn't be naming brands, but yeah, I love the dress shops there, the Pacifica designer dress shops.
Right. I was 90% sure you were going to say Dress Mart, so that you surprised me. And the final question, for heading into this election, your competition for this seat are candidates from the two big parties, from Labour and from National, and the Mongakeke electorate is a bit of a bellwether seat. It kind of swings back and forth between those two. You're obviously coming through wanting to get to take hold of the seat off either of those two candidates. Could you tell us what is it that you offer? Why should people vote for you?
Oh, I think I offer all the green philosophy and the kaupapa that comes with the party kaupapa. But for myself, I'm really interested in people. I have described myself as a misanthrope, and I am by nature. I am I don't really mix too much socially, and few intimate friends. I'm an introvert, but I'm really interested in people and try to help and give solutions to any problems. And I'm a very good listener. That's what I offer.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Oh, it's always good to hear that people are in it for the right reasons. Sapna, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. It's been great to hear a little bit more about your background and why it is that you've decided to give politics a go. I really enjoyed talking to you, and all the very best for the campaign ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Too Much Talk. We are making these podcasts to help people be as informed as they can be ahead of the election. The success of this podcast relies on people like you helping us reach a wider audience. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please spread the word about us with your friends and neighbours, or give us a review in your favourite podcast app. I'll be speaking with all of Maunga Keke's local candidates in the lead up to this year's election, so stay tuned for more conversations. Connect with me on social media if you'd like to get in touch or share your thoughts. I'm Tim_McCready on Twitter, Instagram, Threads. And finally, a massive thanks to my producer Josh Couch, the creative genius behind Onehunga FM and the person who made this podcast a reality. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to make your vote count on October 14.